presentation of the Institute for Sustainable Forestry's Sustainable Forestry Journalism Project, a conversation about the Institute's 10 Elements of Sustainability, conducted by ISF members Greg Condon, Richard Ginger, and Chip Titman. These shows are brought to you in part through support from the Headwaters Fund and Trees Foundation. You can find this show in the KMUD archive and on our own website at instituteforsustainableforestry.com. Join us again for our next show on June 1st at 5:30, right here on KMUD.
Support for KMUD comes from listeners like you and from local hardware and garden supply store Daisy's. When times are tough, Daisy's is there to lend a helping hand to the community. With Humboldt locations in Redway, Arcata, and Willow Creek, and Oregon locations in Medford and Canyonville, Daisy's carries power equipment, garden supplies, water tanks, and at-home delivery. Daisy's, because how we grow matters. This is Redwood Community Radio, KMUD, Garberville, 91.1 FM, KMUE, Eureka, 88.1 FM, KLAI, Laytonville, 90.3 FM, on the web at kmud.org, and at 99.5 FM in Shelter Cove. Support also comes from KMUD, for KMUD, from the Lost Whale Inn in Trinidad, a Redwoods bed and breakfast with views of the Pacific Ocean, featuring 7-course breakfasts and afternoon wine receptions. The Lost Whale Inn has spa services, including massage and a sauna with an ocean view. More information and reservations at lostwhaleinn.com or 1-800-677-7859. And support on KMUD comes from NorCal Mechanical, LLC, with 40 years of experience building and maintaining sustainable living environments in Humboldt and Mendocino counties. They offer design, service, and repair of heating and cooling units, commercial refrigeration, indoor air quality products, efficient water-saving plumbing, and fire sprinkler systems. NorCal Mechanical can be reached at 707-223-2100 or norcalmechanical.com. And coming up, we have a political forum for the news with candidates for Humboldt County Auditor-Controller, featuring incumbent Karen Paz Dominguez and challenger Cheryl Dillingham. That's coming up next.
Okay. Good evening to our listeners and to our viewers. We welcome you to the KMUD News Candidate Forum with those in the bidding for Humboldt County's Auditor-Controller. I am joined by the following candidates who have been listed in alphabetical order: Cheryl Dillingham and Karen Paz Dominguez. I am your host, Lauren Schmidt.
And I'm your co-host, Stella Gerkens. As defined by the County of Humboldt, the Office of the Auditor-Controller is a central service department providing accounting and financial support to the operations of the county departments, special districts, and other partnering agencies. Responsibilities of the Auditor-Controller include accounting for property tax monies, apportions and distributes to the various entities the property tax monies collected by the tax collector, audits and issues payroll checks, audits and processes claims for payment, computes rates for school bonds, computes the amount of taxes due, issues receipts for all monies received by the county, prepares financial reports, records the financial transactions of the county and other related agencies, and serves as Chief Accounting Officer in the county. It is worth noting that as a result of the pandemic and the shelter-in-place order, the following modified services have been added to support ongoing operations countywide: issuing payroll, direct deposit and paper checks, and processing accounts payable.
Tonight, we will be asking candidates a variety of questions. Each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer each question, followed by a 2-minute rebuttal, which will be allotted to each candidate. Candidates who go over their time limit will be muted to ensure equal airtime for all. Each candidate will also be allotted a 3-minute introduction and closing statement. I would like to note that KMA News is a neutral entity, and we do not endorse or promote any individual candidate, political party, or ideal. It is our mission to inform, educate, and to inspire our listening community.
We are coming to you live on KMUD Radio and have a live stream on our KMUD News Facebook page. We invite members of the public to submit questions by calling the station at 707-923-3911 or on the KMUD News Facebook page.
I would like to thank our engineer, Larry Lashley, and my co-host, Stella Gerkens, for helping to organize this event that gives the public an opportunity to participate in democracy. And if you appreciate this service that we provide for you here at Redwood Community Radio, please consider making a safe and secure donation on our website. That's www.kmud.org. And now we will start in alphabetical order with candidate intros. And that's you, Cheryl Dillingham, 3 minutes.
Okay. Good evening. I'm Cheryl Dillingham, and I'm running for Auditor-Controller. I've made a 30-year career out of protecting public funds through solid budgeting and elimination of fraud, misuse, and inaccurate reporting. I have over 12 years experience in the Auditor-Controller's office, including leading the department as interim Auditor-Controller and being Deputy Auditor-Controller for 2 years. I started in the auditor's office as a fiscal assistant after graduating from Humboldt State University with a degree in math. I worked my way up from that position while also going to school at night to take accounting classes and get a master's in business administration. I have performed every job in the Auditor-Controller's office. I've always been willing to step in and do what is needed to make our county government work. I'm here today running for Auditor-Controller to do that again. My years of experience make me uniquely qualified to understand the current challenges and how to correct them. Audits and financial reports may sound dull and unimportant, but that's the job. Not getting the work done on time does not create transparency for the public. It does not foster trust in government. Every day that an audit, reconciliation, or report is late is another day that errors can occur, and potential fraud and misuse of funds could be allowed to continue. I believe in good local government, and I recognize that our ability to accomplish important goals here in Humboldt County depends on our ability to build trust and make government work. Virtually anything we might hope to accomplish depends on our ability to bring in funding from the state and federal government. Over 50% of the county budget comes from state and federal funding. Children's services, social programs, homelessness issues, food insecurity, trails, roads, conserving forests, economic development, environmental protection, affordable housing, all of these important programs are put at risk by the failure to get annual audits done on time. The job of the Auditor-Controller is not just to catch fraud or reporting discrepancies after the fact, but rather to work with all county departments and other agencies to develop strong internal controls that prevent fraud and abuse from happening in the first place. I am proud of my 30 years plus service to the county, and I have a strong track record of working with everyone to develop solutions that ensure transparency and fiscal responsibility.
30 seconds.
If elected Auditor-Controller, I will provide strong leadership. Was that it?
Oh no, you have 20 seconds.
I will provide strong leadership to develop a culture of fiscal responsibility, timely performance, and accurate reporting to protect the taxpayers' money.
Thank you, Cheryl Dillingham. Karen Paz Dominguez, 3-minute intro. Oh, Karen, I believe you're muted.
Thanks. Hello, and thank you for the opportunity to be here today to speak with KMUD listeners. My name is Karen Bas Dominguez. I am your current Auditor Controller. I came to Humboldt County in 2005. I was 17 years old and I came to study at HSU. It was called HSU then. I came up here to study music. Music was my passion and I loved it dearly. I received a music scholarship for performance specifically. I took an accounting class in the summer of 2007 just to meet those general education requirements, and I fell in love with it immediately. I fell in love with the puzzle of accounting, the balance of it, and understanding how all of the transactions, the day-to-day activities that we do, like using our debit card, using a credit card, paying for cash, all of that is actually a two-sided activity that brings balance. And it was very exciting to learn accounting in that way. I switched my major from music to accounting because of how much I enjoyed it, so much more that I put my trombone aside. When I graduated from HSU with my accounting degree, I started working at local CPA firms, one in Fortuna and one in Eureka. And in those CPA firms, I got the experience of independence, how to be an independent auditor, how to come to an organization, look at what they're doing, assess their internal controls, make recommendations for how to fix them, and then hold them accountable if they don't fix them by issuing reports that state as such. Through that experience, I was able to perform audits and complete tax returns for a variety of different entities, government agencies, corporations, private companies, public companies, individuals. And I got to see how accounting can work across many different organizations. When I accepted the position of Assistant Auditor Controller in the County of Humboldt, I entered into a department that lacked a lot of internal controls. A lot of the staff that were there had grown up there. And I say that with quotes for the radio listeners, because that was the only experience they had. They didn't actually work in other CPA firms or in other accounting firms where they could see a wide variety of methods for doing accounting. All they knew was what they were trained to do at the county. And so there was a lot of opportunity for growth, a lot of opportunity for relearning accounting and specifically governmental accounting. So I immediately started investing in training for the staff there. Now that I've been there for 4 years, the Auditor Controller staff are adequately trained on how to do the audit function, how to conform to policies and generally accepted accounting principles. And I'm running for re-election today because we have a lot of work that we still need to do, and we have good momentum to do it, and the team supports me in this run. So thank you very much for allowing me to be here today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much to both of you. And now we go to our first question. In 54 out of 58 counties in California, the Auditor Controller is an elected office. Do you think being an independent, nonpartisan elected position is important to job fulfillment? Why or why not? And can you also further describe the job of the Auditor Controller in your own words? And for that question, we'll first go to Karen Paz Dominguez. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. And I hope it's okay if I ask for the question to be repeated since it was more than one.
Absolutely.
Okay.
So in 54, pardon me, in 54 out of 58 counties in California, the Auditor Controller is an elected office. Do you think that being an independent, nonpartisan elected position is important to job fulfillment? Why or why not? And can you further describe the job of the Auditor Controller in your own words?
3 minutes.
Thank you. I usually have an answer for the question, do you think the office should be independently elected? But what I noticed about your question is you asked specifically about job fulfillment. And I've wondered that myself, because as an elected Auditor Controller, I understand that my position is one of independence, where I want to get along with the county as the organization. I want to be on the same page as the other departments that I audit. But I also understand that I serve a very specific function and a very specific role that can sometimes put me at odds with those departments. In terms of job fulfillment, I feel fulfilled when I know that the work that I'm doing is in line with laws and regulations. I feel fulfillment when I hear feedback from the staff that I work with that they value the work that they do and that they understand the value that their work brings to the public and their community that we live in. I've talked with other auditor controllers who serve in appointed roles across the county. There aren't very many of them. And I've asked them, how do you deal with being appointed if you have to do what you are being told to do by the agencies that you're supposed to audit? And they can also express job fulfillment differently. For them, it's about having less responsibility. They take their role seriously, but at the end of the day, they know that the decisions are always going to be made by the Board of Supervisors. So all of the responsibility will fall to the Board of Supervisors. For the appointed auditor controllers, they have that to fall back on. As an elected, though, the buck stops here. You don't get to hide behind the auditor controller's decision because the elected auditor controller is solely responsible for the choices that they make. They can sometimes, when I say they, in this case, I mean elected auditor controllers. Elected auditor controllers that I've spoken with across the state share in this desire that I have of we wanting to work well with everybody. We wish things didn't lead to conflict sometimes, but we are not averse to facing that conflict when it comes. So that's for job fulfillment. I can say that either elected or appointed, there are going to be different pros and different cons to the positions. In the case of Humboldt County, I think it's critically important that this position be elected and independent. I'm so sorry, I missed what you said.
Oh, 30 seconds.
Okay, and can you repeat that second part of the question?
Yeah, can you just further describe the position in your own words?
Oh, the additional roles or additional jobs. So right now, because we're in a state of emergency, we've taken on a lot of unofficial roles. Like I am also acting as IT support when IT is not available and training other staff. I see the counting. Thank you.
Sorry about that. We are going to give you a 2-minute rebuttal to circle back on that. But we're going to go to you, Cheryl Dillingham, same question, and Stella will repeat that for you.
So again, 54 out of 58 counties in California, the auditor controller is an elected office. Do you think being an independent, nonpartisan elected position is important to job fulfillment? Why or why not? And can you further describe the job of the auditor controller in your own words?
3 minutes.
So I'm interpreting fulfillment differently to mean fulfilling the job duties, meaning can you perform the job better if you're elected versus can you fulfill the job duties as appointed? And in my opinion, the elected independent auditor controller can better perform and better fulfill the job requirements because they have that independence. They have that ability to not worry that they're going to be fired because they're not doing what the appointing body wants them to do, or there's a difference of opinion. The auditor controller has to implement a lot of policies and procedures that people may not want to do, that departments may not want to do, and they need to have that independence and that ability to not just be performing what the Board of Supervisors want. And also, when you look at the budgeting process, it's very important to have that second opinion about how much funding is available and what the current fund balance is and how much resources are available to the county to use and to base their, the Board of Supervisors adopts the budget, but the auditor controller has a responsibility to have currently timely, accurate information on the financing resources available, and also can perform a very important role in estimating available revenues and helping with that process. But they need to be doing it independently from a different perspective and not from the perspective of as they would if they were appointed. And then with regard to the job duties, the job duties, I think one of the things that's really important to realize is that the auditor controller's office is a central service department, and it touches every department in the county. It impacts every service that the county provides to community members. It impacts county schools, it impacts fire departments. There are a lot of organizations touched by the financial reporting done by the Auditor Controller's office, and it's important. And the job, if it's not done well and it's not providing the service that it needs to, it can create a lot of dysfunction and disability. I put my timer on, it said that was 3 minutes.
15 seconds.
I'm done.
Okay, Karen, a 2-minute rebuttal.
Thank you very much. And I really appreciate that other interpretation of your question. I'd like to answer that with my own response too, about how being elected or appointed can impact one's ability to fulfill their job duties. And I've had this conversation with auditor controllers who are both elected and appointed. And similar to the job fulfillment in the other ways, in the other interpretation, there are pros and cons to both. As an elected office, because of that independence, you're able to enforce all the rules you want. However, you're still beholden to the board. The board sets the appropriations for how much money your department is going to have, how many positions you can have in your department, and how you spend your money, whether or not you can get new contracts or whether or not your current appropriations will be increased. And I had direct experience with that when we had a different supervisor, Supervisor Sundberg. And I remember asking him if we could please have additional staff, if he would support our office, if he would lend us a hand, because he was in an important position that could advocate for us in our time of need. And I remember him sitting in my office and pointing to my predecessor's office and saying, not while he's here, you're not getting any more staff. And that was my introduction to this county's politics. It's that it's very much dependent on who you get along with, who you're able to work with. And that's been a disadvantage as an elected. With the appointed, the board is responsible for the job. So they very much appropriate enough funds for the appointed auditor controllers to do their jobs, because the board doesn't want to be responsible for the inability to do their jobs due to funding.
Thank you. Cheryl, 2 minutes.
And I think I'll do the opposite of what Karen did. I think I'll take the opportunity to talk about the job fulfillment more from a personal perspective, appointed versus elected. And I will say personally, I would much prefer that it was appointed, because I don't like politics. But I absolutely, as a professional and as a person that believes in local government, I think it's important that it's elected. So even though my personal comfort zone isn't in the elected zone, my belief that government works best when you have these checks and balances, I support the concept of the elected official auditor controller. And that's basically my comments.
All right, we'll go to our next question. What experience do you have that makes you uniquely qualified for this position? And Cheryl, this round, we start with you, 3 minutes.
Well, I feel that I'm uniquely qualified to run for auditor controller because of my experience working in the office. There aren't that many people that have worked in auditor controllers' offices. I've worked in the office for 12 years. I've performed every job in the office. I started in the office in 1987, which was a long time ago, under Neil Prince, and the environment in the auditor controller's office at that time was definitely different than the environment and the leadership that existed in 2017, 2018. Neil Prince was a CPA. The accounting standards were very strong. I went, he was my mentor. He was the person that made me love accounting. He was the person that taught me about reconciliations, my favorite quote from him was, the difference between an accountant and a bookkeeper is knowing when to stop looking for pennies and do adjusting journal entries when you're doing reconciliations. And basically, you reconcile accounts payable, you reconcile accounts receivable, you reconcile cash, and sometimes, and I always felt it was like an Easter egg hunt, because you're trying to find that missing transaction, or that transaction that was backwards, or that thing that got dropped when the computer glitched, and trying to figure out whether it's a debit or credit and where it went and all of that. And there's a certain point where you get it down to, $5, and you kind of just have to stop. And sometimes it's really hard because it's addictive and you just really want to fix it. And he would always say, hey, I think you've done all you can. We need to close the month because timeliness is extremely important. And he instilled in me that importance of timeliness and accuracy and strong internal controls. And I would love to bring that back to the Auditor Controller's office.
Okay, Karen, we'll go to you for the 3 minutes. And that question again was, what experience do you have that makes you uniquely qualified for this position?
Thank you very much, Lauren, for that question. There are many things that make me uniquely qualified for this position. I think the most notable one is that out of all of the auditor controllers in our recent history, I am the only one that has had to lead our office during an unprecedented pandemic. I'm the only one that has seen what can happen, or what has happened to the office when it is paper-based, when there aren't training manuals, where there isn't institutional knowledge documented enough so that the remaining staff are able to run with it and help the department recover quickly. My unique experience is that right from the beginning of my term, it's been one disaster, one declared disaster, one emergency after another. What's unique about me is my response to it. When the power outages started in the fall of 2019 with PG&E, I recognized that as a call to our office to become sustainable, to be able to respond to emergencies so that we are not missing in action, so that we are able to continue providing services to the public regardless of what's going on around us or outside of our office. I invested in laptops for the office. I invested in electronic record keeping and training staff for how to use electronic software and develop instructions for them. And it adequately prepared us for the pandemic. When we were all told to shelter in place and leave, our office was able to transition into that pretty quickly, enough that we were able to catch up on our entire backlog while other departments were still trying to figure out, how do we work from home? How do we operate without our ability to print things or to be in the physical office? And now we've been able to have two offices. We have our physical office and our virtual Zoom office, and we can offer the remote work ability to staff, which has increased our retention potential. That is one of my unique qualities, is that I don't shy away from difficulties. I don't shy away from conflict. I have a tenacity to make sure that the department is well represented on behalf of the public. Other unique qualities of mine that I've heard, this is feedback that I've gotten, is that I have a really great memory. I'm able to read a lot of documentation in the office and retain the information. So I don't spend a lot of time having to Googling or researching things because I already remember it. I'm able to recite government code when needed. I'm able to
30 seconds.
Present in board meetings without having to refer to so many notes. And that's a quality that helps when you have to make presentations to the public or in a board meeting, or when you're training a big group of people and you have to present in a certain way. I also have the experience of independent accounting work. So I do bring to the office that independent judgment and understanding that things don't have to be just how they've always been. Thank you.
Okay, Cheryl, 2-minute rebuttal.
I want to add that some of my other unique qualifications are that I actually worked in the Public Works Department, so I understand what it looks like to work on the other side from the Auditor Controller's Department. I worked there 10 years. I understand, the special types of accounting that departments need to do that are outside of the accounting that the Auditor Controller's Office does. And I also worked in the County Administrative Office for 10 years, And so I understand the budgeting process in great detail. I've done financial forecasting. I've also worked for the city of Rio Del for 3 years, where I'm the finance director, and basically a finance director for a city is kind of like the combination of the treasurer, tax collector, and the auditor controller and the county administrative office kind of all rolled into one, because you do the budgeting, you do the investing, you do the accounting, you do the audits, you do all the grant reporting, you do everything. And so it's given me a very, very diverse, wide view that I can understand the perspective from both sides of a situation where you're trying to implement a change or do something, and how it could impact a department. But I can also understand why it needs to be done from the auditor controller perspective, to try to help to convey that information and try to understand how to not negatively impact the way a department provides services. I think that's good. Thank you.
Okay, Karen Paz Dominguez, 2 minutes.
Thank you. One of my unique qualities is my ability to build bridges between accounting and other fun things. I say that in quotes too for the radio listeners, because accounting is fun, though there's so many people that tell me it isn't. And what I mean by building a bridge to other areas is I was able to host a conference here in Humboldt County. I invested in our local tourism by bringing people here, because I hosted a accounting conference, and we had representatives from 8 different counties come here to Humboldt County. They spent money here locally to hear about accounting, and they were so excited. They said, we've been wanting to go to Humboldt, but nobody ever invited us. And it's because I have the ability to communicate with other people across the state. I don't shy away from meeting new people and having conversations. And I also am able to present our office, the Auditor Controller's office, as an exciting place to be, an exciting place to work in, to help. And because I've been able to build those relationships with these other counties, it's expanded to where these counties are now providing networking resources to our office, so that in areas where we don't know how to do a thing or how to solve a problem, they will answer those questions for us, and they will provide us with their historical and institutional knowledge. They'll provide us their policies, their instructional guides, so that we don't have to
30
reinvent
seconds.
the wheel. And it has greatly saved our office a lot of time and stress to be able to lean on our partners in other counties where those relationships didn't really exist before. They knew about Humboldt County, but we weren't really part of the organization. And now we are. Everyone in our office is able to communicate with people in other counties and get the help that they need without having to wait for the board to appropriate additional funds to us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. So Karen Paz Dominguez, this next question will actually go to you first. How would you characterize the county's current financial situation, and what factors do you believe led to that situation? You have 3 minutes.
I received this question from another, I think it was the North Coast Journal, actually, and I wish I had it here so I could just read it verbatim, but I remember what I said there too. The way that I characterize the financial situation of this county is evolving. And with growth, there can be growing pains. What we're dealing with right now is an organization that was so entrenched in its culture, in its system of doing things the way they've always been done, or doing things the way that it's comfortable to them, that they struggle to adapt. They struggle to adapt to declared emergencies. They struggle to adapt to a pandemic. And they've also struggled to adapt to a change in leadership and a change in tone in the Auditor Controller's office, from one of a rubber stamp to one of accountability and integrity and transparency. And when I say these things, I'm not trying to say that predecessors weren't these things. I'm saying that the vision, the collective vision of the office, the shared goal, wasn't prioritizing accountability, transparency, and integrity. Now that I've been in this role for 4 years, and it's been very clear to everyone what my positions are, that I will not just rubber stamp things, that things have to be explained and documented for the benefit of the public, we've seen a lot of growth. We've seen our productivity increase because departments are no longer asking us the same questions over and over. They've just come to understand that when you expect a payment to be issued, there has to be an invoice with it, and there has to be some kind of documentation for why an exception would be necessary. We understand now as a county organization that we will be audited regardless of what happens in my office or under my direction. The state and the federal agencies will come and audit. And now I'm seeing this culture change of putting things through just to get them done, but rather let's read the instructions, let's read the guidelines, let's prevent problems now by doing things correctly so that we don't have all these problems later. We can start fixing the things now and deal with them ourselves rather than just passing the buck to the future, because the future eventually catches up. And one of the examples of the future catching up is, we are in 2022 and the state is just now getting to its audits for some of the programs in 2011, 2012. Well, the people in 2011 and 2012 were doing things just the way they've been told to do. Had they read the guidelines, had they been abreast of changing requirements, had they prioritized actually reading guidelines, then we wouldn't be where we are now, where we're being audited for a decade ago and having to return funds or having to explain things that we don't know. We weren't there. We weren't the ones doing it. So I think we're growing as an organization, and I think it only gets better from here. We just have to get past that initial growth phase.
Thank you. And Cheryl, same question to you. Do you need me to repeat it?
Sure, go ahead and repeat it.
Okay. So how would you characterize the county's current financial situation, and what factors do you believe led to that situation? You have 3 minutes.
Well, some of the current financial situations are that the 1920 fiscal year 1920 audit is still not complete. The financial transaction reports that are due to the state controller's office for fiscal year 1920 and 2021 have not been done. The interest apportionments for fiscal year 2021 have not been posted. We're in fiscal year 2022, starting our 22-23 budget year, and we still haven't closed 2021, so we don't have fund balances rolled forward. As a city, when I request reports from working in Rio Del, when I request information because the property taxes for the city are apportioned by the county, and then the city has to draw those down, I have to request 2 years worth of reports because the fund balances haven't been brought forward. I now have to actually request those funds to be allocated to the city because the Auditor-Controller's office doesn't automatically do that like it used to. One of the things I see is that there was really poor succession planning, and that a lot of knowledge left the Auditor-Controller's office all at one time, and the office is basically having to start over from scratch. And I applaud the effort that they've made. I applaud that they're doing the best they can, but they're starting in a lot of ways from the ground up, and that makes it hard, and that makes it more difficult, and that makes it longer to do things, and it results in like recreating systems, sometimes better, sometimes not better. And I think that it's very important that timeliness, county departments cannot do their jobs. Entities that depend on the Auditor-Controller's office for accurate current financial reporting cannot do their jobs if they don't have accurate current financial information. Think about how you would feel if your bank hadn't posted interest to your CD since 2020. Those types of things are concerning. And then when you don't have the single audit done, and the single audit is a package, you have to have the complete audit, the financial statements, all of it done. When that's not done, you start risking our federal and state funding, and that starts risking our programs. And those things are, so I believe the current financial situation is uncertain, and and there's a lot of opportunity for.
Sorry about that, Cheryl. Karen Paz Dominguez, 2-minute rebuttal.
Thank you very much, Lauren. Yes, I do have a rebuttal, and I'm glad that I got to hear some of the things I just heard, because it allows me the freedom to communicate with the listeners here. Succession planning is important. And I will remind everybody that my predecessor, my elected predecessor, left his term early, and an interim was placed. The interim auditor controller made decisions while being the interim, which was a period of less than a year, made long-term decisions, but did not execute them completely, which left a mess for me to clean up when I came in 2019. The first example of this, one of the reasons why we've had to struggle so much is because promises were made to DHHS about object codes. Promises were made about what object codes would be created for them, available for them, and what allowances would be made for them in order to record transactions the way they wanted them recorded. Unfortunately, those promises were not followed through. Those codes were not created, and that agreement wasn't even communicated to the remaining staff and the auditor controller. So when I was sworn in and DHHS started asking me about those object codes and why I wasn't processing transactions the way that it was promised to them, it created conflict immediately without me even knowing ahead of time that there would be conflict. But that's because of promises that my predecessor made.
30 seconds.
That they didn't follow through on. Another example of this is payroll. The payroll division was transferred out of the Auditor Controller's Department in the fall of 2018 with no planning, no transition, no training, no documentation to assist the new Auditor Controller, me, in 2019 for adapting to this change. So yeah, succession planning and the lack thereof have been a tremendous hindrance to our department. But because I'm the Auditor Controller now, I've made sure to have documentation so that this never happens again to anybody else.
Okay, Cheryl Dillingham, 2-minute rebuttal.
I'm just going to say, as the interim auditor controller, I disagree with that interpretation. I didn't make any promises to DHHS. I was trying to interpret what the elected auditor controller wanted and trying to explain that to departments and saying that it really wasn't going to meet me implementing it, that it was going to be the new auditor controller, and just trying to help keep things running in an interim position. As an interim, you have no power. You're appointed. You have no authority. You really can only just keep things running. And the fact that the elected auditor controller went out on maternity leave and wasn't there to help with the transition made things even more difficult. And I apologize. I apologize that when things were started in 2019 that it was difficult. I will take responsibility for anything that I did to contribute to that, but none of it was intentional. And I did the best that I could with the resources I had, which were limited. I had a shortage of staff. I didn't have an assistant to help me. And it is difficult and it's hard, and we've got to do the best we can with the resources we're given.
Okay, we'll go to our next question. What is the auditor controller's role in the budget process? And does the auditor controller submit a budget every year? We'll start with you, Cheryl Dillingham.
Okay, those are two distinct questions. So the auditor controller's role in the budget process is defined in government code. Either the Board of Supervisors can either direct the county administrative office or the auditor controller's office to develop the budget. In the county of Humboldt, it's the county administrative office that develops the budget. The budget itself is always adopted by the Board of Supervisors. So the development process is basically collecting all the information, putting it in a format that the board can understand, and presenting it. The auditor controller's role in the budget process is providing timely, accurate financial information to guide that process and to help provide information to the county administrative office and the Board of Supervisors so that they have accurate fund balances and good estimates for property taxes and things like that. And then the filing of the budget schedules with the state controller's office is the duty of the auditor controller's office, and that's in government code. As far as developing a budget for the department, the auditor controller's office is treated just like any other department in the county, meaning the auditor controller develops their budget and presents it in the same way the sheriff's department does, which is an elected, the assessor, the treasurer, tax collector, the board of supervisors develops guidelines that say how much funding is available. They provide those guidelines to the departments. The departments then present their budgets, and they have an opportunity to ask for additional funding or resources if they feel that they need it. But the auditor controller's office is on a level playing field with every other department when it comes to presenting their budget to the board of supervisors. All electeds and appointed basically have to follow the same procedures and processes, and are out, given their general fund allocation, their salary costs, all of those things are standardized across all departments, and they're all done the same way.
Thank you. Karen Paz Dominguez, what is the auditor controller's role in the budget process? And does the auditor controller submit a budget every year? 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lauren. The auditor controller's role in the budget process is dictated by government code to the extent that they have to show up to the budget hearings. Beyond that, it's up to every county individually to set what the expectation is going to be for the auditor controller's participation in the budget. In the county of Humboldt, the auditor controller works with the CAO, or is supposed to, per the county code 241-6, where it says the CAO has to prepare the budget in participation or in cooperation with the auditor controller. Unfortunately, that's not what happens here in the county of Humboldt. What happens here is all departments are separated into silos where they prepare their own budgets and they submit them to one central office, the CAO. We don't get to see each other's budgets. We don't get to be a part of a conversation where we discuss how things are being allocated. And unfortunately, no, it is not set standard across the board. A lot of allowances are granted to departments that work well with the CAO's office. I've seen it. As the auditor controller, I get to see the discounts that are awarded to departments like the sheriff or DHHS in terms of the cost plan, when they are not expected to pay the equitable shares that other departments are expected to pay. And that's all happens through the budget process. My direct experience with this county's budget is that when I started as the auditor controller in 2019 or in 2018 as the assistant, I told the CAO that the county's budget was not in balance. And they disagreed. They said, it is in balance. It's always been in balance. And I said, no, you see this negative number here at the bottom of this statement? That means it's not in balance. And government code requires that all government budgets be in balanced. So in fiscal year 1920, that was the first fiscal, or 1819, now I'm not remembering that, but it was the first year that I refused to adopt a budget that wasn't balanced. And it was that year that the county earned the budget award. The budget award would not have been won had the budget not been in balance. And I remember previous conversations with the then assistant CAO where he gave me a pamphlet for that award. And he said, hey, what do you think we can do to win this award? And I provided him a detailed list of all of the changes that would need to be made to the budget in order to win that award. And I'm glad that they've implemented those changes now. In terms of, does the auditor controller submit a budget every year? Yes, we submit a budget. There are some
30 seconds.
Thanks. There are some costs that are already predetermined, and that is things like insurance and wages, depending on how many positions are allocated. But we are asked to provide narratives about our office and how we spend our budget to provide services to the public. And that does happen every year.
Okay, thank you. Cheryl Dillingham, 2-minute rebuttal.
Okay. I will admit, I'm starting to get tired. So the budget process changes with different board depending on the county administrative office and the board of supervisors, the budget process can change. And so I haven't been directly involved in the budget process since 2017 when I worked with the county. So it's possible that some of my understandings of how it works have changed, but there always was a budget hearing. All of the budget documents were published and available so that all of the departments could see all of the other departments' budgets. The allocation list that came out that was given to departments always showed what every department got. And the county administrative office always met individually or offered to meet individually with each department to discuss their budget. So maybe those things have changed and you know, it's different now, but it was very much an inclusive process that allowed departments and department heads, including the auditor controller's office, to express their needs to the county administrative office. But, you know, funding is not an unlimited resource, and basically there's tough decisions to be made about how funding is allocated throughout the county to best deliver services. And that's an important role that the Board of Supervisors plays.
All right, thank you very much. And Karen Paz Dominguez, 2 minutes to you.
Thank you. There's something else I want to mention about the budget, and it kind of ties back to how I'm uniquely qualified for this position. And that is because since we've been in a declared state of emergency, there was a need for flexibility in the budget. I was asked by several departments at the beginning of 2019 to make allowances, to issue payments that were maybe exceeding what the budget allowed. And my first instinct was no, the board has appropriated what they have given your department. That's as much as I can go. I cannot go any further. But I was pressured, pressured and pressured. And then I realized this pressure, which is usually very uncomfortable for an auditor controller to receive. In this case, I saw an opportunity to serve the public better because departments had a need for the budget to be adjusted or for us to be flexible with the budget, specifically because of how cumbersome the process was to get an item before the board and get them to approve it. And because we were in a declared state of emergency, there were some allowances that we could make. So what I did for the county, for the departments to be able to operate so that there wouldn't be any holdup in operations, is I released some of the budget blocks. If a department was able to cover certain expenses with appropriations from another category, maybe they had so many vacancies that their salary budget wasn't being used up as much, but they had so many expenditures for travel or for needs of the existing staff, then I made allowances. But there was an expectation, and it was communicated clearly to departments that because I'm allowing you to do this, you still need to go to the board, and now you have a deadline. You have 6 months to get this approved. And because of that allowance that I made and that we've maintained during the pandemic, a lot of departments have been able to issue payments on an emergent basis without being hampered by the need to take things to the board or to the CAO.
Thank you very much. We're going to have time for just one more question before we take a 5-minute break at the top of the hour. So this will go to you first, Karen Paz Dominguez. What do you believe are the biggest challenges facing the Auditor Controller's office, and how do you hope to remedy them? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you. I've turned on the light since it's getting dark here. The biggest challenge in the Auditor Controller's office continues to be the same: staffing. The department was not adequately staffed when I started. It wasn't adequately staffed for at least a decade. I can go back to board videos at least a decade and hearing the Auditor Controller repeat over and over how much they needed staffing. Now we've gotten some staffing allocations, yes, but it's too little and too late because now the needs have changed. We've evolved. We have greater need. We have greater demand. The way that I intend to address this is what I've been doing is I've accepted that we won't it's not likely that we will be adequately staffed in the near future. because we're in the middle of the Great Recession. We're still in an ongoing pandemic with a recent surge this week. And there's also not an incentive to work in office with so much pressure and so much undue press attention. We have to be real about that experience of working in the Auditor Controller's office right now. So what we've done is we focus on automation in the areas where there can be automation. No longer are we going to spend our human capital, these are the county's assets, the public's assets, doing things that a computer can do. We're going to modernize the office by making things less or actually more automated. And we're investing in new technologies, innovative ways of keeping track of tasks that are maybe uncomfortable for people who are averse to change, but they are yielding great returns in terms of productivity for our office. So I intend to address the continued short staffing by continuing to look for ways to modernize and also incentivizing the existing staff to stay there, to retain there. Another challenge of our office is that we don't have a lot of support from the Board of Supervisors. I think it is a disservice to the public for the board to not recognize their fiduciary duty to the office of the Auditor Controller. It shouldn't matter if we are in disagreement. It is still their responsibility to make sure that the department is adequately represented, adequately heard, and adequately funded. How I intend to change that? Well, I'm looking forward to a different board pretty soon after the election. And I also intend to be more transparent with the public that governs this board, that elects them. I'm going to communicate to them when our office is being hampered, when our office is facing obstacles that were put there unnecessarily, because the board, just like an elected
30
auditor,
seconds.
needs to be held accountable. And the best way to get that done is to involve the public. Thanks.
Thank you very much. And to Cheryl Dillingham, same question. What do you believe are the biggest challenges facing the Auditor Controller's office, and how do you hope to remedy them? You have 3 minutes.
I concur that staffing is one of the biggest issues, staffing and training. It's not just the number of positions allocated, it's the number of positions filled. And the Auditor Controller's office is really struggling with filling those positions and keeping those positions filled with people that are trained. So basically, it's not functioning as efficiently and as effectively as it can because it's just not fully staffed, and the people that are in there are not operating at their full potential because they haven't had the training that they need. And that has been partially a result of the pandemic. Recruiting talented, experienced staff in governmental accounting is always challenging, and it's more challenging in the current environment. And so dealing with that is going to be very difficult. And then I think other issues are the fact that there are just a bunch of legacy accounting practices that the County of Humboldt has that need to be revised and updated. And it's an uphill battle to get those done. So not only are you trying to do your just normal day-to-day operations, you're trying to implement accounting changes and deal with audit findings and meet deadlines and get timely reporting done. So my plan is to implement, I have a what I call my four pillars of accountability, which are: you must have strong internal controls, you must have timely reporting, you must have accurate reporting, and you must have organizational responsibility, which means the whole organization has to recognize that it's responsible and it plays a role in having good accounting for the whole county. And there's another issue, which is this decentralization, which is when the Auditor Controller's office isn't providing timely information in a format that departments need, they start to add additional staff and they start to do redundant activities and they start to keep records outside of the central financial system, and that needs to be dealt with too for efficiency reasons.
Thank you very much. And now Karen Paz Dominguez will go to you for 2 minutes.
Thank you. The decentralization of the county is something that I've been bringing up to the board and to the public and to all departments frequently and often because I recognize it as a problem. And it didn't start because of something that happened in the Auditor Controller's office. It actually started because of a misunderstanding of the CAO's office about how the cost plan works. The misunderstanding is that departments that receive federal funding should get the positions because they're able to pay for them. They didn't quite understand that the cost plan allows for those positions to be in the central service departments, charging those other departments who can then draw down from the federal and state grants. And because they lack that basic understanding about how a cost plan works, they awarded all of the positions to all of the departments where they're not able to get accounting experience, where they're not able to get auditor controller focused training. And that's been a big challenge. Now, what the county should be doing is figuring out a way to bring those positions to the Auditor Controller's office. The county invested in a report by CPSHR about the decentralization versus centralization of the county and all of the central functions. And they also made the recommendation that the county needs to centralize these functions. The thing about staffing and training. So yes, our department didn't have staff that was adequately trained when I got there, but now they are. And if they're not, then we train them.
30 seconds.
And there are instructional documents and manuals that they can follow. And what I've heard from all of the staff that we've trained who then promote to other departments is that they are so grateful for the training that they received in the Auditor Controller's office with our team, because it allowed them to be successful in their next jobs where they weren't getting as much training. A lot of the staff that promoted out of our department still communicate with us and still reminisce with us about all of the great experiences we had learning how to run this county together.
All right, thank you so much. And again, to Cheryl Dillingham, 2 minutes.
So the cost plan and the cost plan allocation methodology is a very important tool. And it's sort of that chicken egg thing where if the auditor's office is providing services in a way that the other departments feel supported, they are more supportive of staff being added there. And then there's the recognition that the Auditor Controller's office as a central service department is funded through the cost plan. And when the cost plan is calculated, depending on, what's their time tracking and different activities that are going on, at least usually 75% of the cost of a new employee added to the Auditor Controller's office can be reimbursed through other programs, because of the fact that most of the 50% of the county budget comes from state and federal funding, and that state and federal funding will pay for the cost plan allocation costs. One of the things that the county does is it does not directly allocate back to the departments, the central service departments, the revenue that is, or it's not revenue because it's an inter-fund transfer. The offset generated by the cost plan is not allocated directly back to the department, so it's not transparent.
Okay.
And you cannot see the actual fact that the cost of putting staff in the Auditor Controller's office is not as expensive as it seems when you just do it as a general fund allocation. So there's an opportunity there to help educate people and to help get more staffing in the Auditor Controller's office.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the top of the hour. So I want to throw it back to our engineer, Larry Lashley, and take a 5-minute break so we can drink some water and take a breather. And we'll be right back at 7:06. Stay tuned.
Town Garberville, and on Perkins Street in the Pear Tree Center in Ukiah. For more information, About financial counseling and banking services available, visit vocalityccu.org. And according to the DHHS, the best way to protect yourself and your family from COVID-19 is by getting vaccinated or boosted when eligible. Health officials continue to stress that vaccination and booster shots can reduce hospitalizations and deaths, as well as reducing impacts of the virus to schools and businesses. Vaccinations are available free of charge, and appointments can be made at myturn.ca.gov. For more information, call the Humboldt County Public Health at 707-445-6201. This message is brought to you by the Humboldt County Department of Health and Human Services. And you are listening to Redwood Community Radio, KMUD, Garberville, 91.1 FM, and HD1. KMUE, Eureka, 88.1 FM and HD1. KLAI, Laytonville, 90.3 FM. We're on the web at kmud.org. And FM translator K258BQ, Shelter Cove, 99.5 FM. And for this hour, KMUD programming is underwritten in part by the law offices of Ed Denson, who remind cannabis cultivators, if you get an abatement order, not to panic, but to contact a qualified attorney immediately. Ed Denson has provided legal services for the cannabis community for over 18 years. Free consultations for criminal defense, cannabis licensing, abatement defense, and environmental charges, 923-4764 or edenson95511 at gmail.com. And don't forget to tune in for KMUD's Poetry Show Voices. Host David Holper will be reading newer poems. David Holper has done a little bit of everything: taxi driver, fisherman, dishwasher, bus driver, soldier, house painter, bike mechanic, bike courier, and teacher. He published a number of stories, poems, and books. He is an emeritus professor at College of the Redwoods and lives in Eureka, where he was the inaugural poet laureate. David thinks Eureka is far enough from the madness of civilization that he can still see the stars at night and hear the Canada geese calling. Hear more on Voices this Wednesday evening at 8 p.m. only on KMUD.
Okay, thank you, Larry, our engineer, and good evening. I want to remind our listeners and viewers you have it tuned to KMA News Candidate Forum with those in the bidding for Humboldt County Auditor-Controller. I'm your host, Lauren Schmidt.
And I'm your co-host, Stella Gerkens. I am joined by the following candidates who have been listed in alphabetical order: Cheryl Dillingham and Karen Paz Dominguez. Each candidate has been given 3 minutes to answer questions, followed by a 2-minute rebuttal, which is allotted to each candidate. Candidates who go over the time frame will be muted to ensure equal airtime for all.
I would like to remind our listeners that KMUD is a neutral entity and we do not endorse or promote any individual candidate, political party, or ideal. It is our mission to inform, educate, and inspire our listening community. We're coming to you live on KMUD and have a live stream on our KMUD News Facebook page. If you would like to submit questions to the candidates, you can do so by calling 707-923-3911, or you can submit your question on our Facebook live stream. If you missed the first hour of this event, you can find it on our archives on kmud.org. Now we go to our next question.
Our next question is, how do you hope to remedy past due audit and accounting reports while staying on top of current and future reports? For 3 minutes, Cheryl Dillingham, we go to you.
So I will say it's challenging to answer questions like that when you're not actually working in the office and you don't actually know the cause and the conditions that currently exist. So basically, it's a matter of prioritization and keeping if elected, my idea is to try to keep current as much as possible moving forward, and then use all resources available to get the past due audits and items caught up. Because if you just continually, it's very hard to get caught up once you're behind. It's kind of a never-ending cycle of just not being current. So you've kind of, at some point you can draw a line in the sand and start doing reconciliations from a point zero, knowing what the differences are, and then keeping reconciliations solid and on point going forward from there, meaning you can start doing your monthly reconciliations, your daily reconciliations starting tomorrow based on whatever difference currently exists. And then you're not trying to go back and find 5 years, or it's not 5 years, I'm over exaggerating, trying to find history. You don't have to have that history to start in the moment and move forward. So my concept would be to keep current, keep everything posted as current as much as you possibly can, and get the current year on track, and then go back and close the prior years. I also realized that because of some of the items, once you've done things like actuarials, or you've provided information that the audits require, that was a challenge to get for perhaps 1920, you now have a process in place, so it's going to be easier to do it for 2021 and 2022. And so I would anticipate that with the automation that the current auditor controller has implemented, with the processes and procedures, with having a year-end closing process and documentation of all of the items that are needed, that getting it done and getting it caught up would be much easier than that first year when you got behind.
Thank you very much. And now 3 minutes, Karen Paz Dominguez, same question.
Thank you. Yes, it can be a challenge to try to imagine how one would do that job when they don't work in the office and when they're not up to date on the politics in the county and the environment in which the auditor controller finds itself. I don't have that challenge, though. I can tell you very clearly what we're doing right now to get caught up while also catching up on the backlog. Today, we celebrated because our senior accountant auditor and our accountant auditor have worked together for weeks on end, and they reported to the team that they are fully caught up on the current year journals. This was great news. We are doing exactly what my opponent is imagining she will get to do. We've already caught up all of our current year journals while still trying to catch up on that backlog. And what is more challenging is to correct all of the misinformation that continues to be spread by my opposition, by the supervisors, by other department heads. 1920 is a very specific year with very specific challenges that we have survived. Yes, there is still work that needs to be done to get that year done, but it is outside of the auditor controller's hands now. What we do have control over is the current year, and that's where we are current. That's where the staff have developed tracking spreadsheets, communication protocols, so that we don't fall behind again. what is unfair is to criticize an office that has had to overcome great adversity, great challenges, and has been doing it every day. We don't get vacations. We don't get to go golfing. We don't get to spend all of our time not working. This idea that we're not timely is offensive, quite frankly, to me and to the staff in the office who are there every day, working more than 8 hours, sometimes 16 hours to get caught up, to keep things caught up. We are maintaining, and the office of the Auditor Controller is one that needs support. If you want something to improve, you don't keep beating it up and telling it that it sucks. You help it, you support it. You don't find ways to sabotage it. So I'm very curious to know, of all the things that I've done, that I've implemented in the office to get us to the successful place where we are now, what exactly is going to happen differently if I'm not elected? Because it would be a whole learning curve for someone to come in and learn all of these automated processes that I've set in place. I'm not just the Auditor Controller, I'm also IT support. I'm also the expert on our financial software. Where's that institutional knowledge going to come from? Who will be replacing all of that if all of the knowledge that would be coming in is antiquated, is outdated, is not caught up, doesn't have the experience of surviving a department during a pandemic? So I feel very impassioned right now about this because it is so important to recognize the improvements that we have made. Thank you.
Thank you. And 2 minutes to Cheryl Dillingham.
Well, I would like to take a moment to recognize the improvements that the current Auditor Controller has made. I agree, she has done some amazing technology improvements, and her implementation of working from home and remote working have been very beneficial to the department. And I am greatly pleased to hear that they are caught up and current, and that is wonderful news. The basic functions of the Auditor Controller's office remain constant. The technology changes, and I am confident that I can learn new technology. I left the county, I went to a different organization. I learned a whole new accounting software, a whole new accounting process. It's a process. You read a manual, you follow a procedure. I'm also confident because she's previously said that she has all these instruction manuals and all this information that provides all this training and all of the support to her staff. So it will also be available for a different Auditor Controller should they happen to take over the office.
Thank you. And Karen Paz Dominguez, 2 minutes to you.
Thank you very much. I know this is the rebuttal section, but could I trouble you to repeat the question again so that I stay in that spirit of that question?
Of course. How do you hope to remedy past due audit and accounting reports while staying on top of current and future reports?
Thank you. During this forum, I've been talking about me and the improvements I have made and how I have the momentum to keep going. But I also need to be very clear that this is not a job that I do all by myself. I have the support of the Auditor Controller staff. The people that show up every day do so because they believe in our mission. They want to work with me. They want to learn with me. They want to grow with me. And the way that we're going to get caught up completely is if we are able to maintain that cohesion going forward. I've heard from the Auditor Controller staff that the reason they're still here is because I'm there. And I worry that they won't have the same representation if I am not there. I worry that the will of the people will not be served if I am not there. And what's also important, just as a basic for how we intend to get caught up, we need to have the energy to do so. We need to have the drive and the motivation to do so. We need to have the energy to show up every day and work 16 hours if we have to. We have to have the energy to work on the weekends if we have to, because this is about public service that's greater than ourselves. It's not about a salary. The elected auditor controller gets paid the same thing regardless of how many hours they work. And for some auditor controllers, that meant not working a 40 hours.
30
schedule.
seconds.
For others, it meant working 40 hours and leaving just at 40 hours. For some auditor controllers across the state, and for me specifically, it means working as long as it takes to get what we need to get done and maintaining the support of the team and preventing burnout.
Thank you very much. This next question will stay with Karen Paz Dominguez. The job of auditor controller involves balancing timeliness and accuracy when it comes to filing paperwork. In an ideal world, both are achieved, but which do you think is most important and why? 3 minutes.
Did you say me?
Yes, to you, Karen.
I'm sorry, I glitched out a little bit. Okay, what's more important, timeliness or accuracy? Accuracy, 100%. Accuracy is the most important thing. Otherwise, what's the point? And I say that because you can be timely all day long, but if the information is inaccurate, then what purpose did you serve? What benefit did anyone garner from an incorrect report? All that's going to result in is duplicative work because eventually you'll have to fix it. And one of the ways that I communicate this priority to staff, when they ask me, what should I do? This is wrong. I know it's wrong, but they want it now. I ask, do you want to clean it up now? Or do you want to clean it up later? Either way, it's going to have to get cleaned up. And my preference is to do the work now because the buck stops here. So I will always prioritize accuracy, not just because of to avoid duplicative work, but also because I remember who we do this for. We do it for the public, and the public doesn't want to receive information that is inaccurate. What value does that add? None. Timeliness is important. Absolutely, it is important, which is why our office works as hard as it does to try to get as many things done in a workday as possible. But ultimately, it's all about accuracy. That's why you hire accountants to do your taxes. That's why you hire accountants to balance your books. It's because you want someone to do it correctly. We could all use H&R Block, sure, to do our taxes and get them done on time, but H&R Block is also known to make mistakes because it's an automated service there, and their priority is timeliness, not necessarily accuracy. When you have accountants, they sign their names to these reports. It matters that they are accurate. Timeliness can be, or the lack of timeliness can be forgiven. The lack of accuracy is potentially forgiven, but with a penalty. Sometimes you have to return money. Sometimes you're accused of fraudulently submitting information that was wrong, even if you didn't know it was wrong, but you got it done on time. No, I think we need to be very clear about what this function is. And it is a function of enforcing accuracy.
Thank you. And same question to you, Cheryl Dillingham, 3 minutes.
I believe they're equally important. So accuracy is extremely important. You have to have accounting records that are accurate, but having accurate information that is a year, 6 months behind doesn't provide information for departments or the Board of Supervisors to do the job they need to do. You have to have timeliness and accuracy. And that means you have to have staff and you have to have the ability to do it. And you have to have both, because if you have completely accurate books, but they're 2 years down the road, or even 6 months down the road, or 3 months down the road, departments aren't going to get their claims in on time. They're not going to be accurate. And then you're going to have issues with adjusted claims and adjusted audits and adjusted information. And it's a balancing act. It's very difficult. And my experience has been that information that's supplied should be accurate at the time that you get it. So I haven't personally experienced this challenge where the information came in and it wasn't accurate and that you couldn't post it. So you've got to train departments, you've got to train staff, you've got to be sure that everybody is aware that information must be provided, and it must be provided with proper backup, and it must be provided accurately, and it must be posted. The timelines are you close, departments have to provide information to the auditor controller's office within the first 30 days, and then the auditor's office closes within 60 days, and then reconciliations are done. And reconciliations are the process where you find the errors, if they're posting errors or errors in uploads, or because there's a lot of automation that goes on that has the potential to actually not work. If there's a glitch or power outage, something happens, a file doesn't upload, then you've got information that's not accurate, that's just through automation. So it's a balancing act of timeliness, accuracy, and reconciliations, and they're all important. Timeliness without accuracy and accuracy without timeliness does not provide transparency and readily available information to the public and the departments that rely on the Auditor Controller's office, in my opinion.
Thank you. And to Karen Paz Dominguez, a 2-minute rebuttal.
Thank you very much. One of the marks of a leader is the ability to make difficult decisions, to exercise independent judgment and make a decision. You asked, what is more important, timeliness or accuracy? What is more important is accuracy. This county, I'll say a decade, for the last decade, this county has prepared timely reports. But what good has that done for the county? Because if you look at the last decade of audit reports, filled with audit findings. If you look at the last decade of audit reports, this county has been designated a high-risk county every single year. Timeliness didn't do anything to improve the audit record of this county. So when I talked earlier about growing pains, this is a growing pain. This is a time of growth. We are going to prioritize accuracy because we are correcting a culture, an entrenched culture of just getting things done regardless of accuracy, because we need these people to be satisfied. But I'm not here to represent these specific people. I'm here to represent the entire county, the public's interest, and the public benefits ultimately from accurate information. What this county needs is someone who is willing to make a decision. And the decision I have made is to make sure that all of the information that has my name on it is as accurate as possible, because I don't have time to do the work again later when people decide to give me accurate information. The county can't afford to keep paying back claims because someone didn't do their job correctly in the first place.
Seconds.
For me, it's more than just getting a high five or a thumbs up that you got it done on time. No, I want to make sure that it got done accurately. I want to make sure that people can rely on that information.
Thank you. And Cheryl Dillingham, 2-minute rebuttal.
It was over a decade ago that I worked in the Auditor Controller's office. I worked in the Auditor Controller's office in 1987 through 1998, and then I worked in the Auditor Controller's office in 2008 through 2010. And I will agree that it's a different culture in 2017, 18, 19. And when I came in 2019, all I was trying to do was keep it afloat and provide a transition period. You can achieve accuracy and timeliness. It is a possibility. It is something that can be done. And it is the goal that I will strive for, because that is what you have to have. You have to have both. And one without the other just doesn't work. And I would never just do something because it wasn't accurate, because that is not accuracy. Basically, if it's not accurate, it doesn't get posted in the period. So you close the quarter, you close the period, you close the 6 months, and you post whatever that is that's not accurate to a different period. you still get the prior period closed, you're still accurate, and you're still on time. And you make that tough decision and you decide that that has to be delayed until it's accurate, but you don't delay the closing of the quarter or the month.
Okay, thank you. How can the scope of the auditor-controller position be relied upon to detect material errors, fraud, illegal acts, or weakness in internal controls? Cheryl Dillingham, we go to you for this, 3 minutes.
How can the scope? Could you repeat that question?
Yeah. How can the scope of the auditor-controller position be relied upon to detect material errors, fraud, illegal acts, or weakness in internal controls?
So the Auditor Controller's Office is responsible for developing and implementing strong internal controls to prevent fraud and errors. The role of the position is to review all of the documents and make sure there's adequate backup, to audit departments and make sure that they're following policies and procedures. So the scope, the definition of the job is to do those things. The Auditor Controller is responsible for making sure there is no fraud, there is no misuse, there is no inaccurate information. And that is done using accepted accounting practices and accepted auditing practices. And it is done, there's an annual audit where the independent auditors come in and audit what the Auditor Controller has done to make sure that there are no errors and there are no accounting process mistakes. And as part of that, if you look back over time, there has been an increase in the audit findings in the Auditor Controller's Office, and they have continually increased, with almost none of them being resolved for the past decade. And this is an unfortunate situation, and it's a situation that is making it very difficult for anybody who's in the role of Auditor Controller to get the work done, to get it done timely, and to resolve these ongoing inherent systematic problems that are contributing to audit findings. And one of the ideas behind creating an audit committee is to create an independent outside group of people that can help come up with corrective action plans. Because one of the things that I noticed is a lot of the audit findings, it's just an agree, but there's no corrective action plan. And if you never have a corrective action plan and the whole organization, including the Board of Supervisors, never agrees and buys into how you're going to correct these problems, you're just going to have ongoing internal controls that are not adequate and cannot prevent. And again, the whole idea is to prevent, not detect. You want to have internal controls in place that prevent fraud and misuse. And then you want to do reconciliations to find it after the fact. Reconciliations are more about finding errors than fraud. And then having happy employees also contributes to a reduction in fraud.
Thank you. Karen Paz Dominguez, we go to you. Let me know if you need me to repeat that question.
Yes, please.
How can the scope of the Auditor Controller position be relied upon to detect material errors, fraud, illegal acts, or weakness in internal controls? 3 minutes.
Thank you. The scope of the Auditor Controller is the bird's eye view. We can see all of the money and all of the ways in which it is being transferred across funds and budget units. However, the role itself, that empty title, isn't enough. The county needs to be able to depend on the person filling that role. They need to be able to count on that person being able to identify what the errors are, correct them, and then enforce those corrections. I believe the county has found that in me, specifically because in 1819, which was the first fiscal year for which I was responsible in signing that audit, I received a commendation. The county received it. The Auditor Controller's Office received a commendation specifically because we were able to reclassify and correct $8 million worth of uncategorized revenue. Before that, departments were depositing money of millions of dollars into miscellaneous revenue. or trust fund revenue. There was no clarity about where that money came from, who gave us that money, what's that money going to be used for. And then beyond that, they would record it as revenue in one fund and then transfer it to another place, but also call it revenue there, and then transfer it to another place and also call it revenue there. So then we were triple counting the same revenue still as miscellaneous and uncategorized. I put a stop to that. I eliminated the use of that object code called trust fund revenue, and I forced all of the deposits to go into, well, not the deposits, I forced the depositing entities to clarify where that money came from and what it was for. Why is it going into that account? Why is it being recorded as that if there's actually proof that it's this other thing? And because of that cleanup work that I did, we got a commendation in our audit for the very first time. I don't think the county had received another commendation for correcting its accounting work. If you look at the corrective action plans that I have written, you will see very clearly that I agree with the findings of the auditor, and I've also detailed the steps that I've taken to correct it and by when they can expect the correction. I will also note that people need to keep remembering that 1920, 2021 have all been during a state of pandemic, which no other auditor controller has had to face. And still we've persevered, and still we've made the corrections that have been necessary to the accounting. The other thing I'll bring up that I've corrected is budgets. So I don't have a lot to do with budgets because it's all being done by the CAO's office. But throughout the year, I do get to post budget corrections. And one example that people might recall or have a direct experience with is child welfare services. When the Attorney General was here investigating the child welfare services, they had questions about why is it that the director of DHHS is saying that they don't have enough funding when the child welfare services budget looks like it receives funding, but it somehow disappears because it was being transferred to other places. All of the expenditures that should have been attributed to that program were being transferred and you couldn't see them anymore. So I put a stop to that activity. And now you can see very clearly where expenditures are incurred and why they are being transferred to other places.
Thank you. Cheryl Dillingham, 2 minutes.
So trust funds, or I will call trust funds, or Humboldt County's Achilles heel. They have been a problem and something that is deeply entrenched that needs to be dealt with. And the past practice was to use the generic revenue code, which was miscellaneous revenue. And the way that the revenues were tracked was by the fund itself, not by the revenue code. So, and that is not a good practice. And that was an audit finding, and the current auditor controller did correct that. But those trust funds still exist, and there really is no such thing as a trust fund. It's not even a fund classification anymore. It's a antiquated leftover item that has never been rectified, and that is one of the audit findings that has been going on for a very long time. And the audit committee, again, is a great opportunity to utilize expertise from outside the county, CPAs and other people to help come up with corrective action plans that aren't just being recommended by the auditor controller, which will hopefully have more power and help get departments to make change.
Thank you. Karen Paz Dominguez, 2 minutes.
Thank you. I am excited that the county does have an audit committee now, but I will note that it's not at all independent. It's not at all comprised of people outside the county, though I know recently they've added a CPA, a local CPA, but we haven't had any meetings. The one that was scheduled got canceled. And prior to that, it was all county employees or people who, like in the schools, who operates within the county treasury. So when there's a situation like that, where there is no independence, it is up to the auditor controller to issue those corrective action plans. And ultimately, it's the auditor controller who is going to implement them. So while the audit committee serves to provide input to the board of supervisors in terms of the audit, it is still the auditor controller who has to make the difficult decisions and enforce them and follow through on them. Some other improvements that I've made beyond the correcting of the budget transfers and correcting of the revenue codes is there used to be a habit in this county that one department would have one budget unit, meaning one bucket, and they would record all of their expenditures in there, regardless of what it was spent on, whether it was spent in McKinleyville, Trinidad, Fortuna, Eureka, they were all put into one bucket. And it didn't really give any transparency to the public in those specific areas, in those districts. I represent every single taxpayer in every single district, and every single district is taxed differently. So they deserve to know, how is the county spending money in my district? So I created what are called 10-digit org keys, where every department is given the opportunity to create sub-budget units that they can segregate out by location, by funding source, by grant type. And some departments, like the sheriff, has over 150 now. So the public has direct access to see which sheriff offices are spending how much money is being spent in their districts. And when the COVID pandemic hit, I also was able to use another feature that I created for this county called job ledger codes, so that if departments didn't want to create 10-digit OR keys, they could still classify their transactions using job ledger codes and still provide transparency.
The nick of time. Thank you very much. We'll stay with Karen Paz Dominguez for this next question. How do you foresee yourself working with other county departments and elected and appointed officials, such as the Board of Supervisors and County Administrative Officer? We'll give you 3 minutes for that question. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the things that I am most comfortable with is change. I am comfortable with change. I understand it. I understand why it is necessary. And I also recognize the mistakes that I have made in my communication in my first term. I understand that sometimes I've used too much jargon that was difficult for some people to understand because they're not accountants. I'm going to correct that. I've already started correcting that. I changed the way that I describe transactions when dealing with somebody who has no accounting experience. I also recognize that some people need more than just knowing that something is the right way to do it. They won't do it unless they feel convinced or unless they feel like it is the right thing to do the right thing. So I'm understanding that for some people, it's going to take more persuasion, or maybe explaining why we have to do something, by when we have to do it, and what happens if you don't do it. And previously, I would communicate just by saying, this is the government code that says we have to do it this way. I was making the assumption that everyone shared my same perspective, that we just want to do the right thing for the sake of doing the right thing. I now understand that some people need a little bit more coaching, a little bit more convincing to implement change. I also understand that about different learning styles. Some people prefer reading information. Some people prefer face-to-face interaction. Some people prefer phone calls, Zoom. I can meet people where they are because I'm comfortable communicating in any of those methods. I can text you all day. I can email you all day. I can talk to you like this all day. The point is going to be that I need to communicate more. And I hope to do so, of course. I can't spend all my time in emails because the work still has to get done. And I also understand more about different behaviors and motivators. Our office has benefited greatly from coaching services that we've received, where we've been able to examine the way that we communicate with each other and how sometimes we are perceived differently based on our different life experiences. So someone like me, who is very extroverted, very driven, very motivated, very passionate, can sometimes be impatient with someone who is more introverted and requires more time to process information, or perhaps likes to sleep on it before they make an important decision. Understanding those different personality types, those different learning styles, those different communication styles has really afforded me the ability to relate with people on a whole other level that I didn't relate to in the past. So I do intend to continue investing in those so that I can improve my communication and work better with this county organization.
Thank you. And to Cheryl, same question. Do you need me to repeat it?
Yeah, would you please repeat it?
Yes. How do you foresee yourself working with other county departments and elected and appointed officials, such as the Board of Supervisors and County Administrative Officer? 3 minutes.
So I worked in the county administrative office for 8 years. I said 10 earlier, but I actually had that wrong. And that is one of the skills that I learned working in that office, is how to work with other departments. Basically, one of the as auditor controller and as the assistant CAO, you have no direct authority over department heads. You have to communicate with those department heads. You have to work with them. You have to help them understand. You cannot tell them what to do. And I've had 10 plus years experience learning how to do that. I also got a scholarship and went to the University of Virginia, where I went through the SEI, which is the Senior Executive Institute, which is a training, very intensive training on building resilient and effective local government. And part of that is communication, and it's communication from all levels of an organization and understanding how everybody in an organization has a voice and should have power and should have the ability to help make that organization work. And that training is something that was very valuable to me and is something that I can bring to the role of auditor controller and help me work with others. It's working with departments is one of the most important functions as auditor controller. You are the leader in that department. The staff does the work. The auditor controller provides the leadership. The auditor controller provides that buffer between staff and departments. The auditor controller makes sure that the staff in the auditor controller's office can do their job and be respected by other departments and appreciated, and that departments know why they're doing what they're doing, and that and it's clear and it's communicated and it is supported. And part of that communication is also with the Board of Supervisors. You have to have buy-in from the whole organization. You have to have organizational responsibility and an understanding of the importance of the function of the auditor controller's office. And that will be my goal.
Thank you. Karen Paz-Dominguez, 2-minute rebuttal.
I think we may have different management styles, or at least different perspectives of what the Office of the Auditor Controller represents. For me, I do not act as an island. I very much work with the staff in the Auditor Controller's office. They enjoy independence just as much as I do. I don't expect them to ever do something just because I say to do it. And I don't expect to take credit for the work that they do as an interface to another department. The staff and the Auditor Controller are told from day one, your name has value. The time that you spend here has value. And if you're going to work with this department, make sure that everything that you're telling them is 100% accurate, that you can tie it back to some written documentation or law or guideline. And the staff are empowered to do the work directly with staff. They don't need to buffer through me because they are independent, they are empowered, and they are knowledgeable all on their own. I will, of course, step in if they need me to, if they want me to, but I trust them to be their own independent agents in the office. They have to swear the same oath that I do. I just get to do it publicly. They represent the public just as much as I do. And I wouldn't separate it as the auditor controller staff are the workers and I get to interface. No, I am very much a worker. I am there in the department with them. I am answering emails with them. If the secretary is not there, I'm sitting there at the front desk being the secretary. If accounts payable is not there, I'm sitting right there in the accounts payable desk. If payroll isn't there, I'm there doing payroll. I am there with the department. The challenges we're seeing now with communication, they were not created by me. It was a culture that I inherited. It was a culture that I walked into. I am not the only auditor controller that has a challenge with the board. Every elected auditor controller has had that challenge. And I believe that the reason why my opponent right now gets to enjoy that friendship is because they haven't been independent. They haven't been put in that position where they have to disagree or step up to the board.
Thank you. Cheryl Dillingham, 2-minute rebuttal.
I'm going to agree with the concept that I have not had to be in that position where I've had to step up and disagree with the board. And I do believe that that will be a challenge if I am elected auditor controller, because I feel very strongly about almost everything that the current auditor controller is doing. And I don't think that I will be, I'm not going to be, I'm going to be independent, and I'm going to do what needs to be done to get the job done. I will be strong when I need to be strong, and I will communicate what needs to be done. And there's a point where communication, you have to go beyond communication and just say, this has to be done. And how are we going to get it done? And there are a lot of issues in the auditor controller's office that have gone unchecked and undealt with because nobody wanted to address them. And it is not going to be easy to come in there and fix all those things, but I do believe that there's momentum, there's appreciation, and there's support to get done what needs to be done. And I look forward to that challenge.
Okay, thank you both very much. We have time for one last question. We're running up on the top of the hour, and we want to make sure you have your closing statements. Because we are running out of time, I'm going to try to pair two questions from the audience together. What can be done to make sure bank reconciliations are done in a timely and accurate manner, as well as issuing paychecks to county staff? And with that, Cheryl, we start with you, 3 minutes.
Okay, I'm going to say those are very dissimilar items. So the bank reconciliations basically need to be done daily. That is a daily process. Every day there's money deposited. Every day there's checks issued. Every day there has to be a reconciliation to make sure that what's in the general ledger matches what has gone on with the bank statement. And that is a process that was being done when I was in the auditor controller's office. You basically look at your daily deposits, which of course were done daily when I worked there. I believe that might have changed as a result of COVID, which makes this process much more challenging. You have to reconcile the accounts payable and the cash because of all of the uploads that come from the county schools and all of the automated check issuances for assistance. And there's a lot of opportunity for, at least when I was doing the reconciliations or helping other people or training other people to do reconciliations, a lot of those automatic uploads were things that had challenges. They would get missed, or they would halfway upload. And so you have to do it daily, because if you don't do it daily, or at least, maybe you get behind a day or two, but then you get caught up, it gets so overwhelming that it just becomes daunting and you can't do it. And then with regard to payroll is a whole nother entire process that requires accuracy and departments providing the information that needs to be provided to the auditor controller's office to make sure that what is being issued to employees is accurate. It requires follow-up, it requires training, it requires payroll has always been challenging. It's challenging to pay 2,000 people with, I don't you got 3 employees right now. It's a lot of work, and having all those time cards and all that information come in and get payroll issued, it's a commitment and a process that you just have to follow through with and make sure that everything gets done correctly.
Thank you. Karen Paz-Dominguez, same question, 3 minutes.
Will you please repeat the question?
Absolutely. It's kind of a twofold question. very opposite. We apologize, but for the sake of time, what can be done to make sure bank reconciliations are done in a timely and accurate manner, as well as issuing paychecks to county staff? 3 minutes.
Okay, what can be done to make sure bank reconciliations are done in a timely manner? It's exactly what I have done. I recognized right away that this county did not have any bank reconciliations. The bank reconciliation formula is an easy one, and this county never followed it. There was no actual reconciliation of deposits and disbursements to the bank account. What this county used to do was a reconciliation to the treasurer tax collector. That's circular reasoning. If the treasurer tax collector gives the auditor controller information and the auditor controller posts it, and then they check it against the information that the treasurer tax collector gave them to post, that's circular reasoning. You're not auditing anything, you're not reconciling anything. So I recognized that right away. And I said, no, you need to compare it to the bank. Did what the treasurer tell you happened actually happened? And the challenge that we have faced is that the treasurer tax collector has been impacted by COVID the same way that we have, but they've had a different experience because since the buck stops with the auditor controller, we've taken on all the responsibility because of the late deposits. We don't receive deposit information daily. We receive it in batches, a month. Some at the worst is a month after the deposit has already taken place, but of course we are the ones to take responsibility for it. One of the first things I did to make it easier for the county to be able to reconcile deposits is I changed the practice. On the first day of the fiscal year in 2019, 2020, I told the treasurer we were no longer going to post deposits on the day that they sent us the batch, which is what the county had historically been doing, but rather we're going to recognize those deposits on the day that they were deposited at the bank. So if I can't tie one by one transactions because the way that the information is given to us doesn't match what's happening at the bank, I should at least be able to do a sum total day by day. That's been one way to improve the likelihood that we'll have a bank reconciliation done in time. The county hired MGO to perform bank reconciliations for the county precisely because we didn't have any models to follow. Well, what they found is that $28 million worth of disbursements couldn't be reconciled because of the way that the information is given to the auditor controller. It doesn't match the way that it clears the bank. Another challenge is deposits. They couldn't even make it through one deposit, even with the improvements I made. We have a new report called the deposit details by date range. That still wasn't enough to tie it to the way that the bank account is reporting all of that information for us.
30 seconds.
So I will also point out that this happened for years, and it took me coming to this position to finally put a stop to that. And with payroll, yeah, it is hard to pay 2,000 people in payroll. I know that because I do it every 2 weeks. I don't know that my opponent has ever performed payroll for the county of Humboldt, but I can tell you that it is doable. We have instructions for it. And there's been a time where I've had to do it by myself in the auditor controller's office, and it was successful.
Okay, thank you both. I apologize. No rebuttals on this question due to time. We're coming up close on the 8 o'clock hour. So I want to give you both 3 minutes to share your closing statement. We're going to go in reverse alphabetical order. So that is you, Karen Paz Dominguez, 3 minutes, closing statement.
Thank you very much, Lauren. I have greatly enjoyed this forum. I always love talking about the role of the auditor controller. It is the greatest service that one can give this county is to work in this office because of the pressure and the important need for us to do this job well. I am so proud of the work that I've accomplished in the auditor controller's office in my first term, and I'm so grateful for the support that I've had from the auditor controller staff. It is with their support that I am running for re-election. I would like to serve another term in this office so that I can continue to make great improvements so that the department is able to sustain. That has been my goal since day one. Since day one, I have been focused on succession planning because I have always believed that the office of the auditor controller does not belong to any one person. I am not entitled to that position. It is not my right to have it. It is my privilege. And the best gift that I can give to the county is a functioning auditor controller's office that is sustainable, that can withstand any change in leadership at any time. Right now, we are just now getting to a kind of comfortable place. And I say that very carefully. Nobody is comfortable during a pandemic, but we have so much opportunity now that we are able to work remotely and in the office, we can transition seamlessly. We have so much room for so much room for improvement, so much energy to keep growing the potential of our department. And I would like to see this through with the team. I would like to be able to continue making these improvements, show the county how much power the public actually has by giving them direct access to all of the information that flows through our office. There shouldn't be a need to PRA for what we've paid. I want to provide that to everybody in real time. I want to use the resources and tools available to us already. I want to use the county website so that any department, any member of the public can log on and see how their tax dollars are being spent. And if they don't like how it's being spent, they should have the opportunity to hold those in power accountable. And they should be able to trust that their auditor controller is representing their best interests during the day, during the night, during the weekend, whenever it is necessary, because they deserve accurate reports. They deserve timely reports too, and they should be advocating. They should be fighting with the auditor controller on behalf of the office, fighting the board if that's what it takes, because
30 seconds.
because it's important that there is integrity in this government organization. And I am prepared to fight for the public's right. We are going to follow the model of accountability, transparency, and integrity, just like we have in the first term. Just like it led us through the pandemic, it will lead us through the next term. And if anyone has any questions, please visit my website. It's displayed on the banner in my Zoom box. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much, Karen Paz Dominguez. Cheryl Dillingham, final closing statements, 3 minutes.
I have to appreciate how timely you guys are. It's 7:57 and I have 3 minutes. You would make great auditor controllers. With that, I'd like to thank KMED for putting on this forum tonight and giving me this opportunity to communicate with the voters on my ideas and thoughts. I strongly believe that experienced leadership and good working relationships are necessary in the Auditor Controller's office. I've made a 30-year career out of protecting public funds through solid budgeting, accurate reporting, and elimination of fraud and misuse. I have over 12 years experience in the Auditor Controller's office, including leading the department as interim Auditor Controller and Deputy Auditor Controller. I have a bachelor's degree in math and an MBA with a focus on accounting from Humboldt State University. I've lived in Humboldt County for 41 years. I live in Bayside. I have 2 rescue dogs. I have served on the board of the Jacoby Creek Land Trust for 10 years, and I've been the president for 5 of those 10 years. I care deeply about Humboldt County, and I am committed to good local government. And I recognize that our ability to accomplish important goals here in Humboldt County depends upon our ability to build trust and make government work. As your elected auditor controller, I will provide strong leadership to develop a culture of fiscal responsibility, timely performance, and accurate reporting to protect the taxpayers' money to ensure that the county can continue to provide the important services our community depends on. I am committed to doing this job. I do not think it's going to be easy. It is going to be very challenging. There is a lot of work to be done. There has been a lot of challenges in the past, and I hope that I can fulfill the public's mission if elected. Thank you.
Thank you both very much. And that concludes the KMA News Candidate Forum with those in the bidding for Humboldt County's Auditor Controller. If you missed this forum, you can find an audio recording on the KMUD archives at kmud.org and a video recording on the KMUD News Facebook page.
I would like to thank our engineer, Larry Lashley, and my co-host, Lauren Schmidt, for helping to organize this event that gives the public the opportunity to participate in democracy. If you appreciate the service that we provide for you at Redwood Community Radio, please consider making a safe and secure donation on our website, kmud.org. I've been your host, Stella Gerkens.
And I'm Lauren Schmidt. Thank you so much, Karen Paz Dominguez and Cheryl Dillingham. Go vote, everyone. Take care.